Hey everybody, welcome to Everyday Fi, where we explore the lives of everyday people pursuing financial independence. I'm your host, Megan Combs, and I'm here to say that you do not need $1 million book deal or a famous vlog to reach Fi early. By talking with real humans, I'll show you how to forge your own path to financial freedom the everyday way. Today is part one with my new friend Larry, who shares his fascinating journey towards Fi by blending his career in technology with his passion for outdoor adventures. We dive into his upbringing in a frugal household, his career transition to product management, which is my bread and butter, and his discovery of the Fi community during the pandemic. Larry outlines his strategies like funding a brokerage account to bridge retirement funds, and he emphasizes the importance of directing time and attention where desired. This episode offers valuable insights into balancing a fulfilling life while on the path to financial independence. So tune in after a word from some advertisers, who, by the way, I do not choose and do not condone. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening today. I am with my new friend, Larry, who reached out to me about the show on LinkedIn, which was fun. And we're actually in very similar fields, or were in very similar fields. And we're going to be talking about his Fi journey today. So, hey, Larry, how are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Megan, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. Yeah, as you mentioned, we both kind of come from a technology background. So I spent the last 10-ish years in technology. I currently work for Kohl's Department Stores. So I was a retail buyer, though, coming up in my career. So from a career standpoint, I've been in retail for about 20 years. And from a personal standpoint, I'm married. My wife, Amanda, I got two pups, Finn and Callie, that are both young. And we live in the mountains in Colorado.
Yeah, which is where I wish I lived. And the funny thing is, people can't see this because I'm not doing YouTube anywhere, but I'm wearing a Colorado 14ers shirt. And Larry, tell us how many of these you want to do over the summer because you told us this before we started recording, and I want everybody to hear it from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my goal is to do 25 of these 14,000-foot mountains here in Colorado. There's a little over 50 of them. And yeah, just what a coincidence that you're wearing the shirt. So I'm going out on one tomorrow and you're inspiring me to wake up early and go do it.
Yeah, I'm so curious. So, like, do you do any training beforehand to do that? I was telling you before we recorded that I did Mount Elbert and it took me 10 hours because I did not train. So, with training, if you do it, like, how long does it usually take you to do these 14ers?
I paired up with a few young folks, which has definitely pushed my speed. So I am a ripe age of 42, and I've been hiking a lot with some young 30-year-olds, and I'm just trying to keep up with them. So we've been doing them in the 10, 11 mile range in about 5 hours. So it's definitely getting faster since we started in the beginning of the summer, but they're definitely increasing my speed. I'm just trying to keep up with the youngins.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Do you have any tips, like if somebody wanted to do this as a challenge, especially maybe somebody who might be coming from a place where they live at sea level or they don't live already at a higher elevation? Do you have any tips for training or preparing for doing one of these 14ers?
Yeah, just walking up hills. That's probably the big thing is just getting out there and moving your legs. I found just the best training is just doing it. So just getting outside and getting used to not just the long kind of distances, but as we were talking before the show, you mentioned your feet were killing you. You know, just getting your feet used to walking on uneven surfaces. That's something, if you're not doing it all the time, that'll really cause some pain. So getting used to that is a really good practice.
Yeah, great idea. Yeah, and if you don't have hills, I guess you could use like a treadmill on like an elevation, things like that. My husband does the Stairmaster because here in North Carolina, at least where we live in Durham, there's really not that many hills, like not, and he has a goal of doing two 14ers in a day. And I was like, that's where he is. Like, he's a whole other level. He's one of those 30-year-olds. He's only 35. So, yeah. But if it's your goal, that's what he does. He does Stairmaster and things like that. But he's like, there's really no way to replicate the elevation because like the lack of oxygen. He's like, I'm not really sure how you could replicate that. And I will tell you guys, anybody who wants to do this, the oxygen tanks that they sell you on that are like $20, like the little ones that you like into your face that you just carry in a backpack, like they're crap, like they don't work. It may have given me like a mental boost, but I didn't actually feel like more oxygenated, at least once I was up past like the 14,000 foot mark, because I think Elbert is like 14,300 something, I forget. But once I got past, like, I think it was more like the 12, I was dying and nothing helped. And I just did like a foot at a time, like 10 steps at a time, and I made it. But anyway, what was the reason that you wanted to do that goal? What kind of inspired you to have this as a goal?
Yeah, I've been getting into a real like health kick over the last couple of years. And as I was looking forward coming into this summer, I wanted to have something to really work for. So I had originally said, let me try 10. And then by about late June, I was at 10 and said, oh, that was kind of a sandbag goal. So upped it to the 25. But I really wanted something that was going to force me to kind of stay in a routine and get out there regularly. And I'm fortunate to live in a place where these mountains are very close to where I live, so they're very easily accessible. So it was something that there wasn't going to be a big barrier of entry to do regularly, which made it a lot easier. So that kind of was what led to the goal.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So have you been outdoorsy and like active your whole life? Is this something new? Is it just a part of who you are?
Yeah, I wish it was. I grew up in the suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts, and grew up in very much of like a traditional sort of like sports family. So I played baseball competitively growing up, but was really involved in all just those kind of regular like school style sports. A very kind of traditional, I'd say, New England upbringing. And it wasn't until my wife and I moved to Atlanta shortly after graduating college that we moved to a new place, didn't know anybody, and someone recommended this group called the Atlanta Outdoor Club. And it was just a way to meet people. And through that, we're able to get exposed to things like kind of long distance hiking. We did a bunch of long sections of the Appalachian Trail with that group, rock climbing, mountain biking, and that sort of lit the fire. And that was, golly, I think 2006. And I've sort of been head over heels for anything outdoor since then.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so you grew up in Boston, and what brought you out to Colorado? Like, that's a pretty big difference, I think. Like, the New England vibe and the Western, like, mountain vibe, very different vibes.
Yeah, I think destiny. I was fortunate coming out of college. I worked for a small 200 store department store chain in Massachusetts called Filene's. And about 6 months after joining Filene's, we were acquired by May Company or Macy's. And over the next 8 years, there was a number of consolidations that happened. So we had the opportunity to move every 2 years, just through different consolidations of these corporate offices. So that took us from Massachusetts to Atlanta, Georgia, to then Denver, Colorado for the first stint, to then the East Bay in California over the course of 8 years. So we got to see the country, or pockets of the country, which was great. We were young, we didn't have kids, we really had no fixed responsibilities. So we just sort of followed that path. And after seeing Colorado, there's this notion. I read this concept years ago about primal landscape, and I'll never forget. And it's all about like there are just landscapes that you're sort of meant to be in that really speak to you. And after living in Colorado for the first stint and experiencing the mountains, I knew we would be back here someday. So after spending a couple of years in California, I got an opportunity to work for Kohl's department stores, which I'm still employed with today. And they're based in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin. We spent about 9 years in Wisconsin. And then with the pandemic, had the opportunity to move anywhere. And it was just a no-brainer, head to the mountains. So we moved, yeah, out to kind of a small town in southwestern Colorado.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Did you find any difference between your cost of living in Wisconsin, which I equate to kind of a lower cost of living? Now, I don't know Wisconsin that well, but compared to Colorado, I would assume that Wisconsin's probably a lower cost of living area. So, how did you guys square up that, or did you even find that much of a difference?
Yeah, there's pockets, right? So housing is a huge component of that. definitely is more expensive what we're experiencing in Colorado than we saw in Wisconsin. So absolutely. But in general, what's interesting is we were spending a ton of money going on trips to do the things that we loved. And now we can do everything that we love within 60 miles of where we live. So we actually find ourselves having to build vacations to like force us to get out of what we like joke about as like the bubble where we live, just because there's so much to do where we are. So, where we're spending more on housing, we're saving a ton on travel that would have allowed us to do the things we like. So now our travel is how do we go experience new cultures internationally or do things that we can't do here. But, the day in, day out is a lot less expensive because we have everything we need at our fingertips here.
That's actually a really interesting perspective because you, like us as the FI community, sometimes we look at things very like one dimensionally, like, oh, housing is cheaper in these areas, so I'm going to live in these areas. And it's like, well, you have to look at your entire spending and then compare it to what you would spend in one area versus another area, including housing, but not only housing. And I'm saying this even to myself because my husband and I, we adore Colorado. A big portion of my family live in Colorado. We were talking before we started recording that my aunt has a house in Leadville, which is very close to like where you guys go and do your recreation. And it's one of those things where, we have thought about, wouldn't it be great to live out here? Especially him as a rock climber. He's like, there's so many rocks to climb. So, but we can't square it with how expensive it is. We're like, it's so expensive. But you're not the first person to say that it's doable to live in Colorado and not overspend as a total. There's also somebody who came on who her episode will come out a little bit before yours, and she lives in Southern Colorado. And she lives in a town that's actually technically a medium or low cost of living town in Colorado. She doesn't want me to share which town it is because she's a lawyer and like wanted to keep that private. But I was very shocked by that. And then I was like, so there might be a possibility of living in Colorado for a decent amount of money. So that's interesting. So I really like your perspective. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I love that.
I think that the element too, we talk in the FI community a lot about the money aspect of things, rightfully so. Time is probably, in my opinion, more of an important resource. And the other thing that we've experienced in this move and in immersing ourselves in the place that allows us to do the things we want very closely is we have more time. And that is something that I don't want to get missed is, rather than spending days to travel to get to a place to do the thing you want to do, now you're killing, make it up a week or two over the course of a year on travel time. Like, I don't do that anymore. And I have now all that time to continue and do more of the things that I want to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your career and how, like, where you started when you went to college. Did you imagine you were going to be in product at Kohl's or like did you have other dreams? And then how did it evolve into working at Kohl's as, remind me again, you're a product manager, right? Like me, or is it project manager?
Yeah, so I'm a product leader. So I run our product group. So I have a handful of product managers that I lead, and we are responsible for the finance technology organization at Kohl's. So everything from how Kohl's takes your payment at the register, so those PIN pads that you interact with, through how all of that data flows to the system, and ultimately how we settle with the banks and do all the reconciliation on the back end.
Got it. Okay. And was that your dream career? Like, how did you get there? I'd love to hear the story of that kind of journey.
Sure. Kind of great question and kind of a funny answer. To my Kohl's family out there, it is a dream working with everyone every day. And I absolutely do love it. I've been with Kohl's for 12 years and it's been amazing experiences, great opportunities. It's an amazing group, an amazing culture. And no, this is not at all what I imagined remotely. It's actually kind of a funny story. I didn't know what I wanted to do coming out of college. I went to UMass Amherst. I was a marketing major. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be something in business, I thought. And right before I graduated, a friend of mine, if he is listening, he knows who he is, asked me if I would join him at an info session because there was a girl that was attending that he was interested in and wanted me to kind of play wingman. And I said, sure, like I'll go. And it was this info session for the assistant buyer training program at this company, Find Leads. And they sold me. So as I mentioned, I knew I wanted to be in business, and I didn't even know the role of a buyer existed. For those that watched Friends, right?
I was just thinking about Rachel. I was like Rachel in
Yes, yeah.
Friends. She's like an assistant
That's
buyer.
exactly.
Wants to be, yeah.
Yeah. So I went to this info session and they talked about being at such a young age, you'd have full kind of control and responsibility over running a business, start to finish, all the financials, all the buying of the product, the marketing of it, but, sort of with the support and structure of a big company. And growing up, to kind of go a little bit of my like early childhood, my father is a chemical engineer by trade, but when I was about 3, left that career and bought a Baskin Robbins. So I grew up like as a little kid, kind of working in an ice cream shop, and learned more about business than you could ever do in school from the ages of like 3 to 15. And coming out of that, I knew I was very entrepreneurial, and this buying program really leaned into that skill set. So thanks to my friend, like I said, he knows who he is. I set on a path and I went through that buying program and spent about 13 or 14 years in the kind of the buying world of big box retail.
Yeah. Okay, cool. It's something that I am always curious how people end up in product, because people come to it from so many different avenues. Like, I don't think, now I'm not saying these people don't exist, but in my experience, I have not met anybody who majored in product management and wanted to be a product manager. Like, most people are like, what the heck's a product manager? And then they think we're project managers. And I'm like, no, I don't do anything with budgeting or time allocation or any of that stuff. So yeah. And I mean, I majored in art history. Like, I have a master's in art history, and I'm a product manager in like a property management software company. So yeah, it's so interesting how people come from it, from different areas, to come to product management. So
Yeah, I wish I knew about both the buying role and product way earlier in my life. Like, so I transitioned from the buying world into product via a transitionary role, which I was sort of playing a hybrid role between a business group and technology. And that gave me exposure to a handful of really amazing product managers and some product leaders that I said, wow, this is kind of like an evolution of even where I am today, and the world is going in the way of technology. What a cool opportunity to blend all of this together. And that's how I got my first sort of taste of product, and now I'm hooked. And it was just a really interesting transition. And I think what the base of it is, I love to solve problems. And I think that's also like why I get so excited and passionate in the FI space, because I feel like we're all just out there kind of trying to solve problems, and that's what a product manager does. It is every day, right? Like you said it great in the Choose a FI episode, right? Like we're figuring out what's wrong and we're working to fix it, and it's such a great career.
it's so funny because our CPTO, which is a Chief Product and Tech Officer, he put on a like monthly meeting for the tech and product people, and it just started today. And he was like, he loves to ask these kind of trick questions. He's that type. He's hilarious. I find him so funny. And he's like, so what is our, goal as a product and tech organization? Is it to build software? And of course, like everybody is like, yeah. And he's like, okay, does anybody have any other answer? And I was like, we solve problems. And then literally his next bullet was, we solve problems. And I was like, yes, yay. Okay, promote me. Anyway, so I was like,
For the win.
yeah, it was really good. And he and I like just are here. Like, it's so funny. Yeah. And so we don't just build software to build software. Like, you have to dig into the why are you building this, though? Like, sure, yes, we do that. But why are we doing it? We're doing it because we're solving a need, a problem, a pain point, whatever you want to call it, for somebody. And it's something that I like to do. I think what's hard for me about product management, and I don't know if you've found this, is I feel like at least the way that we do product management at startups is it's very unsustainable because you actually are wearing quite a few hats, or you do quite a few roles that I think at larger companies they actually split it up, but at startups they don't. Like, they expect you to not only do the strategy and actually do the research on what should be built, why it should be built, when it should be built, and talk to all of the people involved in that, and how it's going to make the company money, and how we're going to market it, and how we should tell the salespeople to sell it, and is there a market fit, blah blah blah. That's all the strategy part, and then there's the actual delivery part that we are also in charge of. That we have to do this thing called writing Jira tickets, and nobody needs to know what that means because it is not worth it. Jira is horrible. And you have to run Scrum meetings if you do like a sprint type of thing, agile. And it's a lot. It is a lot. I mean, I have never been so overloaded in a job before. However, I've never made so much money before. So they do pay you quite a bit of money to do this, because nobody's going to want to do this as a passion. Like, it's not really a passion job. I mean, it's fun, but like, you need the money to kind of spur you into doing this job because it's hard. And so I don't know if you can relate to any of that, and if I don't know if Kohl's maybe does it differently, because Kohl's is a much larger company than my company is. We only have around like 250, 300 people. But I wanted to see what your thoughts were about that.
Yeah, surprisingly, it is just about the same in terms of the expectations for product at a big company. And one of the things, though, that I really try to work with my teams and the broader product organization on is, just like everything else in our lives, like, we have limited time and attention and bandwidth, right? So we have to be just as proud of the things we say yes to as the things we say no to. So as a product leader, I spend a lot of my time helping support my teams say no to things. Everyone wants to do everything, and it's not that people are trying to skimp on work, but you're right. Like, the responsibility is vast. There's a lot of pieces to it, which is why you really have to be disciplined about where and how you spend your time. And in a lot of cases, that means saying maybe not no, but not now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good thought. It's hard for somebody like me who's kind of a people pleaser. I actually did not think that I was one of those people until I became a product manager. And I was like, oh, this job's really hard because I want to make everybody happy. I was like, I can't do that. And it's not that you're making people angry, but it's that you just have to delay their happiness for somebody else's happiness because their happiness needs to happen faster. So, yeah, it's an interesting job if anybody's interested. I might not be making it sound as good as it can be. It can be really interesting and creative. And if you get to do mostly problem solving and the problems are interesting to solve, then it's great. If you're doing problem solving where it's like, oh, this resident wasn't able to sign up for internet because we didn't do this thing, and you have to have your developer look into it. Like, that's not fun. That's not a fun. That's like a day-to-day problem to solve. That takes up like half my day, and that's why I'm just anyway. That is a side note. We don't need to get into that.
I wanted to touch on something, though. You mentioned earlier on, like, the why and understanding, what the problem is to solve and why it's important to solve. I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine at Google the other day, and this whole AI craziness is, I think, highlighted something very important in this space, which is things like AI, right? That is a tool, right? It's a way in which we can solve a problem. The first question we should always ask, though, is what is that problem we are trying to solve, and how will it either help the company or the customer? And this really translates to our FI journeys as well, right? Why are we doing what we're doing? Why do I need this specific FI number, right? What is that going to get me? What will my life look like if I achieve that? Running at money or a number for the sake of it is not what I think a lot of us are trying to do, but it's really easy to get kind of over rotated on some of the flashy things, whether it's AI and everyone's saying, well, I kind of need AI. So like, what does that look like? Well, who cares? Like if the problem that is most important to solve today can be solved using AI better than it could solve any other way, great, that's your solution. But to go in kind of posing the question of like, how can I use AI to help X is kind of a backwards way to approach it, just from my opinion.
Yeah, you're putting the cart before the horse or the solution before the problem. Yeah.
Correct.
And yeah, I'm of the same mind. Like, I actually have hesitated to use AI in product management because at least the tools that are geared towards like a broad spectrum of people have not been helpful. However, our company was very smart and hired an AI product manager who is working on AI tools, not mainly right now to help our internal systems, because that's where the biggest pain points are, is like we are scaling and we're scaling so fast that like our internal folks can't keep up. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to create a tool to help. And he has this tool that basically goes into every single resource that we have. So our Google Drive, our calendar, our Slacks, our Jira, our Confluence, and it can do things for us like write PRDs. And for people who don't know what that is, it's a product requirement document. You don't need to know the details. But anyway, writing something like that takes a lot of time. And what this did for me today is I was like, write a PRD on this problem that I'm trying to solve. And it looked everywhere, including in my own conversations in Slack, and all of the Google meetings that I've had where I used Gemini to take notes. It even looked at all that and it put it together. And it was almost identical to the one that I created myself over several weeks. And it did it in minutes. And I was like, okay, I'm using this from now on. Like, that was so good. So it really can help, but it's really that data set that is super important, because the broader data sets of the other AI tools that I was using, it was too broad and it wasn't able to really dig into the problem I was trying to solve. So that's just something, if you're going to use AI in anything, just think of where it's getting its information, because that's really the important part, I think, is that data set. But anyway, we're kind of getting off track a little, sorry. But
yeah, no worries.
But yeah, I just love that you are also in product, so I can kind of like nerd out a little bit. And then people are probably still like, what are product managers again? I'm not going to go into that. You don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, just listen to Megan's episode on Choose a FI. She did the best explanation of product management I've heard in a long time.
I was winging that so hard. And then I loved how Ginger was like, okay, so you're telling me all these things, but you're not actually telling me what you do. Like, what products are you building? And she was like, why aren't you sharing this? And I was like, well, some people probably can't, like, because it's proprietary and they can't necessarily tell you things because there's contractual obligations and it hasn't launched yet. And so like you can't. But I was like, here's the general gist of what I do. And I don't know if I mentioned this on the episode, but I'm now on their internet team. So like we provide something called bulk internet for people who are renting single family homes, which is something that has never been done before. It's very common in like apartment complexes, which is pretty easy because it's all wired together. But doing it in individual single family homes is actually quite complicated. And so I took over from the product manager who was on that team, who left and who actually lives in Colorado, by the way. And so I took over from him, and it's just been, I mean, it's a whirlwind. It's like there's so much going on and it's fun, but it is getting very hard. And actually, Mitch and I, my co-host who comes on sometimes, we talked about doing a podcast on burnout because I'm just feeling really burnt out after only 5 weeks of taking this on. And I was like, wow. I mean, it went like I've never felt burnout that quickly before. So anyway, let's get back to you. Let's stop talking about me. Jeez.
Well, I'm interested to hear what you and Mitch kind of kick around, because I think that's very real for a lot of us.
It is, yeah. And I mean, we've all suffered from burnout here and there, but this is like, I am almost every day at the end of the day telling my husband, like, oh my God, I really want to quit. Like, it's so much work. And so we will talk about it in that episode. So stay tuned, y'all, for
Definitely.
that episode. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about your money history. And we touched on it a little bit. I mean, your dad was a chemical engineer and you grew up in Boston, but I want to know more than that. So I want to know, like, what's one of your earliest money memories?
Yeah, I was super fortunate to grow up in a household that really, as a kid, money was never an issue. We lived very frugally. And it was interesting. My parents both instilled in my sister and I this kind of mantra that was always echoed, which was, it's not about what you make, it's about what you save. And I didn't know how sort of profound that was until recent years as I've been getting more involved in the financial independence world. But that was sort of something that was instilled to me very young. We never really wanted for anything, but again, we lived a very modest, not flashy lifestyle. So as I reflect back on that, I actually had no idea how we, quote, were with money. I always kind of assumed like, hey, we're okay. So my parents never like openly talked about our financial situation. It was always just like, hey, you have the clothes you have the clothes you need. You can go to the things you want to do. You can play the sports you want to do. But that was sort of that was it. We didn't have drive fancy cars or take extravagant vacations. Like we lived very, very modest lives, which was great. It was a great way to grow up. And I think unknowingly instilled in me sort of a live within your means general savers attitude, which again, I at the time had no idea how important and valuable that was. And looking back on it, it was probably one of the best values that they could have instilled beyond honesty and integrity and all of those types of things. But yeah, I feel super fortunate having had that experience.
Yeah. How old were you when you kind of learned that lesson about it's not what you make, it's what you save, do you think?
Yep. I always worked at the ice cream stores is like a little, like, I remember as like 5, 6 years old, like doing odd jobs, right? Like, hey, go clean this up. And, kind of like that was sort of how I earned my allowance, if you will, which was great. And it was always okay. Like, if you want this toy or you want this thing, like, yeah, like save a few bucks and it can be yours. So I think from like a very early age, it was probably though, I'd say in my like early high school years when I actually got a job. I worked a bunch of odd jobs. I sold Christmas trees. I worked at a Staples like office center. I worked at a farm stand, like all kinds of random things. And yeah, it was always just sort of the mantra in the background of great. Yeah, you had a great week. You made a bunch of money, but it's going to do you no good unless you pay attention where it goes. So yeah, it was just always in the back of my mind.
Yeah, that's great. And you said that your dad switched from his chemical engineering career and did the Baskin Robbins, I guess, franchise ownership is kind of what he
Yeah.
did. Do you know what prompted him to switch? And around how old were you when that happened?
Yeah, I think I was in the three-ish age. As I understand it, like a little bit of sort of what you described, like some frustrations. And he worked for Morton Chemical, like a big chemical company, and was a plant manager. And I think just had done that for a while. And with those types of roles, there's a lot of politics and like everything else. He just kind of got sick of that grind. He has MBA and always wanted to be something entrepreneurial. And I think that burnout coupled with this opportunity allowed him to kind of take a leap. And yeah, I think that's how he got here. And it was certainly like we all do it kind of in the FI journey. Like this was not a guarantee, right? I mean, he left a very comfortable, well-paying gig for a very unknown sort of franchise role, but knowing that he had the skills going into it really made a great career out of that for a number of years.
Yeah, that's great. And so did he keep that franchise until he retired? Or did he do something else?
No, there's like a whole other story. He sold that to kind of go back in the chemical world and then went back in the franchise world.
So he's a flip-flopper. Interesting.
Yep. Definitely flip flop for some other opportunities. And now he's done some work, which is super cool, with a group called SCORE, which is a group that helps business owners. So it's basically like a group of volunteers that help out entrepreneurs in different capacities, which is a really cool organization. And he teaches MBA classes now at Endicott College.
Yeah, that seems
Yeah.
really cool.
So, yeah, cool career.
Yeah. So did your mom have a career too, or was she kind of a stay-at-home mom, or what'd she do?
Yeah. Oh, no. So she was a special ed teacher for, golly, probably 40 plus years in and around the Boston area. So on top of raising my hellion self and my sister, who is very well behaved and kind of the opposite of myself. Yeah, she was a special ed teacher for, yeah, a long time.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So, was there any dynamic with your dad switching back and forth and your mom's? It kind of sounds like she stayed the same. She was always the teacher. Was there any sort of dynamic you noticed in your household that changed when he would be, you know what, I'm going to go and do this now. No, I'm going to do this now. No, I'm going to do this now. Like, did you notice anything there, or was that not something that you really were aware of?
Yeah, like and not to go like too much into the depth of it, but the transition from the selling of the ice cream store to the going back in chemical and then going back, it was actually Dunkin' or Baskin Robbins is owned by the same company that owns Dunkin' Donuts. So he went back into a Dunkin' Donut franchise role. And yeah, that was an extremely trying time for our family. He left to well, we moved down from Boston to Louisiana in that transition when he went back into chemical to take a job that he thought was going to be work a couple of years and retire. And we were there for 6 months and they decided to shut down the plant and left us pretty high and dry. So did I see a change? Absolutely. Like that was a really rocky period for us for a couple of years. I mean, my parents, they lost a ton of money and definitely like a setback. And yeah, I think it's a testament to just like resiliency at its finest. Like they could have kind of thrown up their hands and said, okay, like we're just gonna, I don't even know what we would do. It was a really tough time, but got right back on the horse. And you look back now and they're in an absolutely great position financially, but not because of happenstance, because like they worked their absolute behinds off to come back from that setback. When again, I think it would have been very easy just to say, all right, like this set us back. It's kind of all for loss. Like we're never going to be where we thought we were. No, they both went back to work and worked real hard for another number of years to claw back from that setback.
Yeah, that's a really awesome testament to, like you said, their ability to adapt and take the L, but also just run with it and get back up to where they wanted to be. Like you said, some people might take that and be like, you know what, maybe I just need to stop working and it's fine that I'm not where I want to be and I'm just going to live off Social Security or whatever. And to be honest, like my dad and stepmom were kind of like that. Like they faced trying times in their careers a lot. My dad is very bad at working for another person. So he had a really hard time kind of holding down a job. And what's weird is he's not like some guy who like works at like a grocery store or something. And not that's a bad thing, but I mean, it's not like he was working these jobs that were unskilled jobs. Like he was a lawyer, he was a nurse, and he couldn't like hold down those jobs because he hated having bosses. He always wanted to be his own boss. And then my stepmother, now this is a little bit harder, but her school that she worked for like 20 years went bankrupt along with her pension. So
Terrible.
yeah, but I mean, instead of them like doing what your parents did and just making the move to like get back on it and just go back to work and really get back to where they wanted to be, they kind of just were like, well, this sucks. And then just didn't really do anything about it. They stayed in the same small town that had very little opportunity. And now they live on Social Security and that's it. That's all they live on. So it's something that I take the lesson from that as like, that's where I don't want to be, right? I don't want to be like that. And so I love that your parents did that. And I'm curious, like, how do you think your upbringing kind of shaped who you are as a person today? Not just financially speaking, but just your philosophies as an adult.
Yeah, so I'll get into that in a second. I think there's a really good nugget here, though, that comes from the world of sort of stoicism. And we'll probably talk about this in a little bit, but as I've been thinking about my life post FI, I'm really interested in the coaching world. So I've been doing, I took a 6 month program on coaching. I am working with a number of clients right now, but there's this notion from stoicism, which is it's not the events that shape our lives, but our beliefs about them. And I think it's really important in both of these examples, right? We have the power and the ability to choose how we want to interpret anything. And that is so, so, so powerful. And so I think my parents, as I reflected, and these are all things that I never thought of at that moment or during that time, but as I've reflected in the very recent time, that's what they did. Like they could have chose to just say, this is a terrible experience and we can't come back from it and all is lost. And they didn't. They said, yeah, you know what? This is a test and we can get back from this. What did we learn and how are we going to move forward? So I think that's just a really important thing to remember. Like, we have the ability to choose how we want to interpret the events in our lives.
Yeah, agency is so important. So important.
Yeah, and back to like the upbringing. It's funny. I was just back on the East Coast. My parents wanted to rent a cabin and do sort of like an annual family vacation with my sister and I. My sister's got 3 kids. My oldest nephew. One day, I forget exactly what the situation was, but we're asking him to do something and he was kind of him and hawing. I don't want to do it. I don't want to get off the couch or whatever. And another thing that I grew up, like my mom always saying, anytime I would say I couldn't do something, she would immediately say, Larry, if I gave you $1 million, could you figure it out? And every time I'm like, son of a gun. Yeah, yes, I could figure. She's like, well, then go do it. Like, go figure it out. And I used that line on my nephew, and his eyes rolled. He was like, enough, Uncle Larry. Go back to Colorado where you came from.
Also, like, where's my $1 million? You told me to go do this thing. Now I'm doing it for that $1 million. No.
Exactly. Yeah, now I'm on the hook. But as silly as like a little phrase, like that does sort of, I'd say, encapsulate like a lot of the environment in which I grew up. It was, like, try it. Like, you can try, like, try it. If you can't figure it out, they were always there to help and support, which was amazing. And there were times where I needed it, right? Like, in all sorts of different dimensions of my life that they were there and I was stuck or I was going down the wrong path and they were there to help. But it was never just the immediate handout. It was give it the good old college try. And if you can't, we'll be here to help. And I think that sort of value really resonated in me and has helped me in all facets of my life.
Yeah, that's incredible. Your parents sound great.
They are lovely.
Yeah. We love you guys if you're listening.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's so funny because like I was also the kind of person who kind of did the things that I wanted to do, and I tried a lot of things because I wanted to try them, but I had the opposite. My family was like, you're never going to be able to make money doing that. And so I purposely went and tried things that were outside the realm of what they thought I should be doing because they told me not to. So I just think it's so funny that we did similar things, but for very different motivations from very different backgrounds. So yeah, when they were like, you can't make any money in the art world, well, they were right. But I tried it, I tried it. And I really did enjoy like doing art history. Like I absolutely loved it. And I just, it doesn't pay very much and it's very hard to get a job in. But I don't think I would give that back for anything. Like it shaped me who I am today. And like you said earlier, the fact that it's not the things that happen to us that shape us, it's the way we react to them. I don't think that's exactly what you said, but that's kind of what I heard is like everybody reacts to different situations differently. And it's just so funny how that literally landed into our laps as like an example. So I love that that just like came together really beautifully. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Didn't always just like go the direction. I do have a funny story similar to you. When I went to college, the first thing and the only thing my mom said not to do, she's like, go to college, have fun, be safe. Just for whatever reason, don't join a fraternity. And so of course, like day one on campus, I am walking around like, where are the fraternities? For whatever reason, I was like, I'm going to go do that. And it turned out to be a great experience. Or some of my best friends, actually, the guy that I mentioned earlier that dragged me to that info session was one of my fraternity brothers. And yeah, so it turned out to be great. But I definitely went against the grain on that one.
Yeah. I'm so curious why she said that. I'm like, oh no, did she have like a bad experience or does she just think they're all just like super bros or something? I don't know. That's so funny.
Yeah, it could have been, the Animal House movie or whatever it was. But yeah, I ended up in a really great fraternity, a big kind of melting pot of humans, and it was an awesome experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. All right. So are you ready to dive into your FI journey a little
Let's
bit?
do it.
Yeah. So how did you find the financial independence movement? Because there's so many different finance like philosophies and ways of thinking and gurus and all of that stuff. Like FI is, I would say, kind of niche. And so I'm curious what introduced you to it. You know, who was the first person that kind of drew you into the community?
Yeah, it was early on in the pandemic with a lot of time and not a lot to do. I don't really know how exactly I stumbled upon it, but I wasn't a big podcast listener up until that point in general and was just sort of browsing the world of podcasts and came across the Choose FI podcast and just sort of started from the beginning and got really hooked. And one of the things that really I started to reflect on very early on was, like I mentioned, I grew up with a very like kind of savers mindset. Don't get me wrong. Like I think part of why I was a really good buyer is I'm really good at spending too. So I don't want to give any impression that I'm like a 80% savings rate type of person, but I definitely am a live within my means, but enjoy still nice things. So I was saving a fair amount of money in the neighborhood of like 40 to 50% savings rate. So solid. But I had no idea why. Like for what, right? Like I was funding all these accounts, I was doing all of these things, but sort of with no real plan beyond, okay, so someday I'll have some healthy amount of money in some accounts. And as I was listening to Choose FI, what really caught me was like there can actually be intention around this to lead to this outcome of living an incredible, financially free and flexible life well before what I was kind of just rattling around the back of my head, which was at 65, like everyone else, I'll stop working.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so, were you married at the time? And then, if you were,
Yes.
was your wife on board with this as well?
Yeah, she grew up in a very frugal family, a lot more frugal than mine. So she had a lot of just kind of great saving tendencies as well. But again, it was just so interesting when you look back on it. Neither one of us like ever questioned this. We just sort of like the hamsters on the wheel, just going and doing our thing, and this money's going away. And like, sure, generally it's invested. I think at the time it was like all just in like the target date funds that someone years and years ago had said to go put it in. And we were just going about our lives, which honestly wasn't a bad thing. We amassed a solid amount of money, but had we not stumbled upon Choose FI and her and I start down this path, I do think we would have found ourselves not being able to be financially independent until much later in life, with the one very specific being we would never have known to fund a brokerage account. Now we're going to get like really into the weeds here, but we would have never known to fund a brokerage to get us between when we could be financially independent and when we would have easy access to those traditional retirement funds. So things like that would have just never happened. And I'm really super grateful that we stumbled upon it when we did, which at the time I think I was 30, 39 or 40. So it wasn't like super early on in life.
Yeah, we all wish we would have found it at 19. We all be retired. Yeah, and just to clarify for people, like one of the reasons why funding a brokerage account is a good idea and not over a 401k or anything, like those are also very important, but there is this concept of to access the 401k money without having to pay that penalty, you do a Roth conversion ladder, and I can link to an article on how to do that by the Mad Fientist. But basically, there is a 5-year waiting period before you can access the money. And so the brokerage helps you bridge that gap and just makes the money more liquid, meaning you can get it without any penalties or anything. You're going to pay taxes on it, but if your expenses are relatively low, you don't have to pull out as much. And so you're not taxed actually that much because it's not taxed at ordinary income. It's taxed at a completely different bracket. I won't get into the details on that. That's not what this show's for. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that for people. And then I want to know, so you found Choose FI and you said, I realized that there can be some intention around this and I didn't know why I was saving. So what did you find out? What is your why of FI?
Ooh, what is the why of FI? At the underlying, I think at the really like the base of it, it is the ability for myself and my wife to be able to dedicate our time and attention where we want, when we want. And the reason I don't say it much more like specific or concrete than that is I fully expect those places to change. 5 years ago, I would have never told you that I would have been like a fine nerd and like so focused on this. Like if you had told 10 years ago, Larry, that you were aspiring to be a coach in the financial independence community, he would have looked at you like you had 17 heads. So I don't want to sit here and for a second pretend I know what future me is going to really want. What I do know is I want to be able to dedicate the majority of my time and attention to whatever that is, whenever that is. And so that's what FI really means, I think, to me and my wife.
Yeah, and we do know that whatever you're going to want is going to cost money. Like money
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. So like money is what fuels all of our goals and all of what we want, no matter what it is. So yeah, I love that. All right, that was part 1 with Larry. Tune in next week for part 2. Thanks for listening to the Everyday 5 podcast. If you're loving this show, here are some things you can do. Number 1, subscribe in your favorite podcast player and share the show with your friends and family. You can also find us on YouTube now. Some of the videos actually have our faces. Number 2, please leave a review. I am always looking for ways to improve the show. Number 3, check out my website, everyday-fi.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and leave comments for myself and the guest. Number 4, if you're interested in sharing your own financial independence story and connecting with other community members, you can find a submission form at everyday-fi.com/podcast. And lastly, number 5, join my Patreon membership for only $5 a month at patreon.com/everyday5podcast. This is a one-woman show, so every little bit of support really helps. See you next time as we continue to go down the path to financial freedom.